Pratilipi's core thesis was that great stories can come from anywhere.
कहाँ से शुरुआत हुई थी and what scale are you at now?
We launched Pratilipi Comics, we launched Pratilipi FM, we acquired IVM Podcast, which is the largest full-stack podcasting studio in India. We acquired Westland Books, which is a traditional publisher.
How do you be in the top 1%?
The difference between YouTube and Netflix is that the average quality of content on Netflix is definitely better than the average quality of content on YouTube. It hasn't evolved at all. We only launched monetization about 2.5 years back.
How do you ensure that आपके प्लेटफॉर्म पे कोई भी एरा गैरा आके कोई भी कचरा नहीं डाल रहा है?
So we want people to come and write एरा गैरा कचरा. इतनी कहानियां पढ़िए, एक कहानी तो मैं भी लिख सकता हूँ.
इंडिया में कितने ऐसे लोग हैं who officially write to make a living for their life?
If you exclude journalism, maybe people used to read Shakespeare, for example, or Ramayana, Mahabharata, for example. They were powerful 100 years back. They are powerful today. And chances are that they would be powerful 1,000 years later. I think I would put 99% odds that AI would be human good in the next 3-4 years. So that intuition-based jobs are not going to go away.
Who do you consider your competition to be?
Now that generative AI is becoming better, you should be utilizing that to make yourself like a better podcaster, creating content faster, or like engaging with your users better.
Low point in your life, and what was the best advice that you received?
I was quitting Vodafone. Even if you leave, like what difference does it make to Vodafone? Versus you stay and prove me wrong that you're actually good at sales. That would, if nothing else, Vodafone is still not here, but you will feel better that you have proved everybody wrong. The purpose is कि जितने ज़्यादा और जितने अच्छे high quality writers हैं, purpose is not to make money. तो अगर फिर से मुझे प्रतिलिपि बनाना होता तो
Hi everyone, I'm your host Shivank and we are part of the 01 Network by Zerodha. Together, we intend to bring you insights from the top thinkers in the field of entrepreneurship, technology and investing.
इंडिया में अपार्ट फ्रॉम ऑल दीज जितने भी यूजर जनरेटेड कंटेंट प्लेटफॉर्म है यूट्यूब इंस्टाग्राम प्रतिलिपि जैसा बहुत कम लोगों ने बना पाया राइट बट फॉर द पीपल हु डोंट अंडरस्टैंड help us understand what does Pratilipi do and how does the idea of democratizing stories come and कहाँ से शुरुआत हुई थी and what scale are you at now?
Sure. So Pratilipi's core thesis was that great stories can come from anywhere, just like great talent of any form. And once you find a great story, it's too memorable or too valuable to just be there in one format, one language. So once you find a great story, it should be leveraged into as many languages, as many formats, as many geographies as possible. So that was the overarching vision with which we started. Now, obviously, you can't really do all of this when you start. So we started by building an online literature product, which is what maybe 80% of people still know Pratilipi for. So people can come and publish their stories, books, novels, poems, essays, stuff like that. And other people can basically come and read that. It's entirely user-generated content, two-sided marketplace. And then about 2.5 years back, when we became confident that within online literature, now we have enough of a lead, we started expanding from there and we launched Pratilipi Comics, which is like a comic version of Pratilipi. We launched Pratilipi FM, which is like audio version of Pratilipi. We acquired IVM Podcast, which is the largest full-stack podcasting studio in India. We acquired Westland Books, which is a traditional publisher. And we also started licensing our stories to ecosystem partners for other formats and other geographies. So our first TV show was launched about 6 months back. Second TV show was launched about 4 months back. Third TV show was launched about 2 months back. First web series was launched in January.
Netflix.
And no, this one was on Amazon Mini TV. And there's a bunch of other stuff that is under production or development. But the thesis was, and it still remains exactly the same, that build products where anybody can come and share their stories with the rest of the world, find out which of these stories are the best stories using actual user consumption model versus guessing which story is going to work, and then leverage them into as many formats, as many languages, and in future as many geographies as possible.
Abhi, majority of the business drives from which product?
Literature is by far the largest, both in terms of users and in terms of revenue, simply because that is the one that has existed for the longest time.
और इसका business model, how has it evolved over the years? What was the first business model?
It hasn't evolved at all. We only launched monetization about 2.5 years back. But before thinking about Pratilipi, think of how do real world creators monetize in the real world. So at the absolute top tier, there are people like J.K. Rowling. So these people will monetize in 500 different ways, from rights on books to movies to talk shows to merchandise to what have you. But like, how many people can be J.K. Rowling? Maybe 100, 200, 500,000. There's still some limit. So the layer below that is people who have both very high quality and very high frequency. Think of like game streamers, for example. These people will typically monetize via subscription. The layer below that is where you either have very high quality or you have very high frequency, but you don't have both. So, for example, actual physical book writers, like traditional publishing, they are writing very good content, at least some of them. It's just that they will only publish a book once every 3 months, 3 years. So, in that case, you're probably going to buy individual books versus subscribing to it. Or on the other side, think of bunch of game streamers again, but who are not very high frequency. There, people will give them gifts or some kind of virtual transactions, but they'll not typically be a subscriber. So this is one-time payments. Then the layer below that is basically people who monetize via ads. So the way Pratilipi thinks about monetization essentially is exactly this. So our top creators will monetize from TV shows also, literature also, comics also, FM also, Westland also, IVM also, and so on and so forth. The layer below that monetizes via subscription. The layer below that monetizes via one-time transactions. The layer below that monetizes via ads. So now coming to Pratilipi's main product, literature. There, the way revenue model works is that everything on the platform is free. There is nothing that is behind a hard paywall. But there are about 35,000 stories which are part of Pratilipi Premium program. These stories are behind a soft paywall. So if you're a free user, you can read one chapter a day for free of as many books as you want. So if you want to read 80 books, you can come every day, read all 80 chapters of 80 books, and you don't have to pay anything ever. But if you want to binge read, if you want to read 5 chapters of the same story on the same day,
Then you pay.
then you pay. Either you can be a subscriber, in which case everything is open, or you can pay a small amount of money to unlock one chapter. And then, like, if you want, again, continue to read on free. If you want, again, use coins to unlock chapter and so on and so forth.
Got it. One thing. So यहाँ पर जितना भी जैसे आपने बताया कि कोई भी क्रिएटिव आर्ट हो या फिर जैसे क्रिकेट हो या फिर ऑथर्स हो, जो टॉप 1% होता है ना, वो सबसे ज्यादा पैसा कमाता है
Right.
और बाकी सारे लोग नहीं कमा पाते. हाउ डू यू बी इन द टॉप 1% और व्हाट डू यू थिंक व्हाट्स द क्वालिटी ऑफ दैट 1%? क्या सब लोगों को टॉप परसेंट, सब लोग तो टॉप 1% बन नहीं सकते, तो वो लोग ऐसा क्या करते हैं कि वो टॉप 1% में आते हैं? कोई भी आप आर्ट की फील्ड या किसी भी फील्ड में ले लो.
I think arts fields may, except for like scientific fields where the answer is yes or no, generally there will always be a power log. Like top people will make a lot more money, they will get a lot more fame than most people. What it requires will differ a little bit from different field to field, but there are certain things which are probably common. One is that these are the people who have some innate talent of that field. Like famous example being Tendulkar. Like when he tried to become a pace bowler, he was not very successful. But as a batsman, of course, he has been one of the greatest ever. So same is true for across the board. Like I cannot be a good artist. That you require at least a certain level of basic innate talent to get there. Then you require a lot of iterations. You need to put in the hard yards, even if you're really, really, really good. Like look at Kohli, for example. He became one of the best batsmen in the world maybe 10 years back already. And he still continued to put in the same effort from then till now. So like if you want to maintain that level of consistency, that is the amount of effort that you have to put in. So I think that is second. And third is like just that both ability and willingness to continue to reinvent yourself, because the world is going to continue to change. So you will have to always learn and unlearn and learn and unlearn to become a better version of yourself if you want to continue to remain at that top 1% people. Beside these three, I think there is also a huge element of luck that's often involved. Sometimes as a creator, for example, like you write 5 books, none of those becomes popular. Then the 6th one becomes suddenly popular, and then all the previous 5 also start becoming popular. So I think these are probably the things which are common in any art-driven field.
Got it. You know, when was you mentioned luck. When was the last time you felt that you were lucky? What were some instances in your life जहाँ पर आपको लगा कि यार this was purely a luck?
A lot of times, like a bunch of people that we ended up hiring, for example, people who joined us, it was mostly a coincidence that they decided to apply or they decided to join us. Like couple of investor conversations have basically started out of the blue.
Give me an example.
Like our last round, for example, was led by Krafton, the company that owns PUBG. So the way that came about apparently was that there's a company called Redish. So Redish's CEO came to India. He was meeting a bunch of founders. He also ended up meeting me. He went back and apparently he and Krafton's chairman were friends. So he told Krafton's chairman that, you know, if you ever want to go to India, like this is the guy that you must meet and this is the company that you must invest into. So essentially, like that's why they reached out to me on LinkedIn, and that's how my last round happened. Like completely out of the blue, I was just meeting a person or a founder who did not even have an India presence. It was just like general chit chat, and just sometimes life works out that way.
Wow. Yeah, help me understand. If I'm an author I'll publish my work on your platform, and then anybody in the world can consume the product, consume my work. Two things. कोई भी प्लेटफॉर्म के लिए सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट चीज होती है एंगेजमेंट. अब यहाँ पर जो कंटेंट है, बाय डेफिनेशन इट्स यूजर जनरेटेड, सो यू डोंट हैव control over what quality of that content is, right?
Right.
So how do you work on increasing the engagement of the platform?
It's actually pretty simple. So think of YouTube, for example, right? The difference between YouTube and Netflix is that the average quality of content on Netflix is definitely better than the average quality of content on YouTube.
Right.
But the best of YouTube is probably at par with, or maybe even better with, the best of Netflix.
Give me
And
an example.
So many different examples, like so many different examples. Think of like, if you're interested in esports, for example, like every single esports tournament would be there on Netflix, on YouTube, some of which would probably be the highest quality ever imaginable. Many of which, like none of which is going to be on Netflix, but most of which are not there on almost any other channel, including Twitch, for example, which is the biggest live streaming platform. So like this is true across the board. In fact, like just look at the number of series that started on YouTube, for example, and then they were commissioned by Netflix. From TVF ke shows to AIB ke shows to a bunch of other things. The beauty of UGC platforms is that you have just so much more content. It's then product managers and founders' job to build the right sort of recommendations so that you can find which kind of stories to recommend to what kind of people. Like find out which of these stories are the next TVF or the next AIB. That is the part of recommendation engine that you will. So like Pratilipi's engagement, in fact, like take a wild guess what would be time spent on Pratilipi.
Maybe 1 hour a day.
For free users, about 90 minutes per user per day, an hour and a half. For subscribers, about 2.5 hours per user per day.
Average consumption of your wow. तो एक हो गया रिकमेंडेशन इंजन, जहां पर आपको पता है कि एज अ कंज्यूमर मैं आपके पास आ रहा हूँ और मैं क्या क्या देख रहा हूँ, तो आप फिर मेरे को बम्बार्ड करोगे वैसे ही मेरे इंटरेस्ट के शो से, तो इससे एक एंगेजमेंट बढ़ता है. व्हाट आर सम अदर थिंग्स दैट यू डू एज अ प्लेटफॉर्म टू इंक्रीज द एंगेजमेंट?
Like that is probably 95% of it. Essentially, it's just finding out which story is the right story for this particular customer. Like an example that I often give is think of Harry Potter. Some of my friends think that Harry Potter is one of the greatest books ever written. Some of my friends think that Harry Potter is crap. Some of my friends think that Harry Potter is great, but it's not like Lord of the Rings. It's like great for kids, but not so great for adults. It's the same story, same book. It's just that different people have different tastes. As long as you recommend Harry Potter to someone who likes Harry Potter, like they are going to read Harry Potter and then reread Harry Potter and then reread Harry Potter. So engagement is solved. So you need to have good quality content in the first place, and then you need to have the recommendation which can tell people like this is the next story that you should read.
And how would you incentivize people to put good quality content? How do you ensure that आपके प्लेटफॉर्म पे कोई भी एरा गैरा आके कोई भी कचरा नहीं डाल रहा है?
No, we want people to come and write era gera kachra. Like how do you become a good writer? It's by starting to write. The first 10 things that you write are probably going to be shit.
Worst.
It's just that over a period of time you'll get better.
My first video was I can't look at it.
Exactly. So we want people to come on to Pratilipi and write whatever they want, even if it's bad quality. They will get reader feedback. They will see their own content. Sometimes other writers will come and comment on that content. So it's gradually that they will become better. It's not that we expect that somebody starts writing on Pratilipi and suddenly it's like the best book ever.
तो उसके बाद how will you ensure that actually good quality content is there? Do you also invest in content?
No, we have, for context, about 12 million stories published on Pratilipi.
Every
No, total.
ठीक है.
Every month we have 300,000 news stories published on Pratilipi. So if you have every month 300,000 stories published, even if only 10% of those are good, that's still 30,000 stories. It's like just the sheer scale solves for quality.
शेयर स्केल, ये शेयर स्केल हम कहीं ना कहीं नेटवर्क इफेक्ट्स की बात कर रहे हैं. आई नो दैट शुरुआत में इट वाज अ चिकन एग प्रॉब्लम, जहां पर आपको ऑथर्स को भी कन्विंस करना था और आपको कंज्यूमर्स को भी कन्विंस करना था. सो यू वेंट टू ऑथर्स 400 लोगों के पास कि यार आप कुछ भी मत करो, आप बस हमको परमिशन दे दो कि हम आपका कंटेंट पुट कर दें. 150-200 मान गए एंड देन आपने उनका कंटेंट पुट कर दिया. हेल्प मी अंडरस्टैंड, वो 100-200 लोगों को आप कैसे 1000 पे 10,000 फिर 1 लाख एंड राइट नाउ इट्स मोर देन 1 मिलियन, राइट?
तो पहले 100 राइटर्स बेसिकली वी जस्ट गॉट थ्रू हसल कि पहले 400 लोगों से बात की थी प्रॉब्लम समझने के लिए, उन्हीं 400 से दोबारा बात की, उसमें से कुछ 100-150 मान गए तो उनकी स्टोरीज Pratilipi आ गई. फिर 100-150 और स्टोरीज या 100-150 और राइटर्स जो पब्लिक डोमेन कंटेंट है उससे आया. फिर लेट्स से नेक्स्ट 200-300 बेसिकली इनके ही रेफरल से आए कि अच्छा आपकी स्टोरी पब्लिश की, आपके कोई दोस्त है उनकी स्टोरी पब्लिश करते हैं. फिर वहां से जो बड़ा ग्रोथ स्पर्ट आया, लेट्स से 500 राइटर्स से मे बी 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 राइटर्स तक का, दैट वाज कि हम इनकी स्टोरीज, जो राइटर्स ने अपनी स्टोरीज Pratilipi पब्लिश की है या हमने जिनकी स्टोरीज पब्लिश की हैं, हम उनको टैग करते हुए वो पोस्ट फेसबुक पे डालते थे। और क्योंकि जैसे अगर आप इंजीनियर हैं तो जनरली आपके दोस्त भी काफी सारे इंजीनियर्स होंगे, आप डॉक्टर हैं तो आपके दोस्त भी डॉक्टर्स होंगे, तो अगर आप राइटर हैं तो आपके दोस्त भी राइटर्स होंगे। जब हम ये स्टोरी शेयर करते थे तो उन राइटर्स के दोस्त उनको पढ़ते थे और उसके बाद वो आते थे कि आपने हमारे दोस्त की स्टोरी पब्लिश की, क्या हमारी स्टोरी पब्लिश करोगे? तो आई थिंक 500 से 5000 या मे बी इवन 10 15 20,000 तक दिस वाज आवर बिगेस्ट ग्रोथ चैनल फेसबुक। और फेसबुक पे भी उन राइटर्स की स्टोरी शेयर करना तो उनके दोस्त लोग हैं।
बिल्कुल।
उसके बाद आई थिंक हमने कुछ मेहनत की नहीं राइटर साइड पे। थोड़ी बहुत चीजें करते थे, जैसे लाइक राइटर्स को खुश रखने के लिए इवेंट्स करते थे, या हैंड रिटन पोस्ट कार्ड्स लोगों को भेजते थे, या काफी सोशल फीचर्स पे काम किया कि लोग रिव्यू करें, कमेंट करें। बट जितनी मेहनत करनी चाहिए थी, जितना इन्वेस्टमेंट करना चाहिए था, उतनी मेहनत उतना इन्वेस्टमेंट हमने राइटर साइड पे उसके बाद किया नहीं। लेकिन धीरे धीरे होता क्या है कि जो ये चैनल्स चलने लगे हैं, चैनल्स धीरे धीरे बढ़ते जाते हैं। तो धीरे धीरे वहां से बढ़ते रहे। फिर जब हम लोग रफली अबाउट लेट्स से 1 लाख राइटर्स के आसपास पहुंचे, वहां से फिर मैजिक शुरू हुआ कि अब एनफ स्टोरीज हो गई और एनफ पढ़ने वाले हो गए। तो बहुत सारे लोग ऐसे कहानी पढ़ रहे हैं कि मैंने 100 कहानियां पढ़ ली। अब मेरे दिमाग में यार इतनी कहानियां पढ़ी है, एक कहानी तो मैं भी लिख सकता हूँ। तो अगर आप पिछले 3-4 साल में देखेंगे तो अगर हर महीने लेट से 100 नए राइटर्स आते हैं तो उसमें से 95 राइटर्स ऐसे होंगे जो प्रतिलिपि पे ही रीडर्स थे और उन्होंने बहुत सारी कहानियां पढ़ी और फिर वो खुद से राइटर्स बन गए।
यहाँ पर आप इनका एक नया मोनेटाइजेशन सोचते हो कि हम एक राइटिंग का कोर्स भी निकाल देते हैं?
निकाल सकते हैं, बट हम लोग सप्लाई साइड पे जनरली फोकस करना चाहते हैं कि ज्यादा से ज्यादा लोग लिखें, उस पर कोई फ्रिक्शन नहीं डालना चाहते हैं। तो जैसे हम लोग एक्चुअली इसमें इन्वेस्ट करते हैं कि राइटर्स और बेटर राइटर्स कैसे बने। जैसे हमने एक प्रतिलिपि राइटर्स एकेडमी लॉन्च किया हुआ है, जिसमें एसेंशियली टॉप राइटर्स, पीपल हु हैव वॉन साहित्य अकेडमी, ज्ञानपीठ, लाइक बिग लिटरेरी अवार्ड्स, उन्होंने कोर्स कंटेंट बनाया है जिसको सीख के आप अच्छे राइटर्स बन सकते हैं। नो अगेन लाइक द पर्पस इज कि जितने ज्यादा और जितने अच्छे हाई क्वालिटी राइटर्स हैं, पर्पस इज नॉट टू मेक मनी। फिर हम लोग फेलोशिप प्रोग्राम चलाते रहते हैं जहाँ पे हमारी टीम है वो रेगुलर कॉल्स लेती है, वेबिनार्स करती है कि कैसे आप कैरेक्टर के बारे में सोचें, कैसे आप जॉनर के बारे में सोचें, कैसे आप एंडिंग अच्छी बनाएं। तो सिमिलरली हम लोग काफी सारे नए नए इनिशिएटिव्स ट्राई करते रहते हैं जिसमें जो अच्छा चलता है उसको स्केल करते रहता है। लेकिन इनमें से किसी का भी पर्पस पैसे बनाना नहीं है, इनमें से सबका पर्पस ये है कि हाई क्वालिटी लिटरेचर और ज्यादा कैसे बढ़े। अगर कोई अभी मेरे पास आए कि मुझे एक मार्केट प्लेस बनाना है जहाँ पे एक सप्लाई साइड और एक डिमांड साइड है, चाहे वो राइटर्स हो या कि कुछ भी और तरीके का हो, तो जनरली माय एडवाइस वुड बी कि पहले एक साइड ऑफ द इक्वेशन, और बिजनेस पे डिपेंड करेगा कि कौन सी साइड ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट है और ज्यादा आसान है क्रैक करना, बट जहां तक हो सके पहले वो एक साइड क्रैक करो बिफोर इवन वरीइंग अबाउट द सेकंड साइड। तो अगर फिर से मुझे प्रतिलिपि बनाना होता तो जब तक मेरे पास 3-4-5 हजार राइटर्स नहीं हो गए तब तक मैं डिमांड साइड पर उतना फोकस करता ही नहीं, और उसके बाद भी एटलीस्ट 20% ऑफ माय फोकस वुड हैव गॉन टू क्रिएटर साइड जब तक मेरे पास 100,000 राइटर्स नहीं आते।
और हाउ वुड यू कन्विंस द क्रिएटर्स, द ऑथर्स विदाउट हैविंग, सो फॉर एग्जांपल अगर मुझे किसी को पॉडकास्ट पे लेके आना,
दैट इज व्हाई मार्केट प्लेस बिल्डिंग इज सो हार्ड। तो एग्जैक्टली क्यों चिकन एक प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व करना हार्ड होता है, एग्जैक्टली क्यों मार्केट प्लेस सॉल्व करना हार्ड होता है, बट हार्ड होता है मतलब ये नहीं है कि ट्राई नहीं करोगे। जैसे हम लोग थोड़ी देर पहले बात कर रहे थे कि इंडिया में तो यूजीसी प्लेटफॉर्म्स बने नहीं है, तो इसीलिए नहीं बने क्योंकि यूजीसी प्लेटफॉर्म बनाना डिफिकल्ट है। लाइक इवन इफ यू लुक एट यूएस फॉर एग्जांपल, हर एक सक्सेसफुल फेसबुक और यूट्यूब के पीछे देयर आर 100 अदर यूजीसी कंपनीज दैट गॉट टू सम स्केल एंड देन दे डाइड। तो जस्ट सपोज्ड टू बी हार्ड।
and then how do you work on the network effects वाला? Please also tell that.
तो फर्स्ट थिंग इज टू अंडरस्टैंड नेटवर्क इफेक्ट्स होता क्या है। तो नेटवर्क इफेक्ट्स का मतलब ये होता है कि एक ऐसा नेटवर्क है जहां पे अगर कोई एक नया नोड आए, लाइक एक प्रतिलिपि के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में सोचते हैं, तो प्रतिलिपि इज अ नेटवर्क ऑफ रीडर्स एंड राइटर्स। प्रतिलिपि में नेटवर्क इफेक्ट्स तब होंगे जब अगर एक नया यूजर प्रतिलिपि ज्वाइन करता है तो एग्जिस्टिंग यूजर्स को ज्यादा वैल्यू मिले कंपेयर टू पहले मिलने के। तो नेटवर्क इफेक्ट्स बिल्ड करना इज डिफिकल्ट। जनरली ऐसे होता है कि कुछ टाइप के मॉडल्स होते हैं जहां पे नेटवर्क इफेक्ट्स होते हैं, कुछ टाइप के मॉडल्स होते हैं जहां पे नेटवर्क इफेक्ट्स नहीं होते।
Give me example of both.
तो थिंक ऑफ फॉर एग्जांपल कि टाइम्स ऑफ इंडिया। अब टाइम्स ऑफ इंडिया पे एक आर्टिकल है जिसको आपने पढ़ा और आपको मजा आया, उसके बाद अगर मैं उसको 100 लोग पढ़ रहे हैं या 200 लोग पढ़ रहे हैं, आपको ज्यादा मजा आएगा उससे? इट डजंट मैटर कि एक आदमी पढ़ रहा है या 100 आदमी पढ़ रहा है, आपके एक्सपीरियंस में कोई फर्क नहीं आया। मे बी यू कैन आर्ग्यू एक छोटा फर्क आएगा कि अच्छा आप शायद 4 लोगों से डिस्कस कर सकते हो सेम स्टोरी, बट बहुत ही छोटा फर्क आएगा, नॉट मीनिंगफुल। वर्सेस थिंक ऑफ प्रतिलिपि फॉर एग्जाम्पल। एंड प्रतिलिपि थोड़ा कॉम्प्लेक्स केस है क्योंकि प्रतिलिपि में मल्टीपल टाइप्स ऑफ नेटवर्क इफेक्ट्स हैं, बट एक सिंपल सा सोचते हैं कि प्रतिलिपि में अगर एक नया राइटर आया तो एज अ रीडर आपको अच्छा लगेगा?
अगर नया राइटर आया तो बिल्कुल मेरे को अच्छा लगेगा, वैरायटी मिलेगी मुझे।
एग्जैक्टली। एक नया रीडर आया तो राइटर को अच्छा लगेगा?
बिल्कुल अच्छा लगेगा क्योंकि मेरे यूजर्स बढ़ रहे हैं।
यू गेट मोर मनी पोटेंशियली। अगर एक नया रीडर आया तो ये तो क्रॉस, इसको बोलते हैं क्रॉस साइड नेटवर्क इफेक्ट्स, कि एक नया राइटर आया तो रीडर को फायदा हुआ, एक नया रीडर आया तो राइटर को फायदा हुआ. नाउ लेट्स थिंक ऑफ सेम साइड. अगर एक नया रीडर आया प्रतिलिपि पे, तो प्रतिलिपि का एंगेजमेंट इतना हाई है कि 90% प्रोबेबिलिटी है कि वो रीडर रिव्यूअर भी बनेगा, वो रीडर रेटिंग वगैरह भी करने लगेगा. नाउ यू कैन बेटर जज कि मेरे को ये स्टोरी पढ़नी है कि नहीं पढ़नी.
It will benefit me as a reader.
Because of that data network effects, that now you have more ratings, more reviews to decide मुझे कौन सी स्टोरी पढ़नी है, कौन सी स्टोरी नहीं पढ़नी.
Right.
सिमिलरली अगर एक नया राइटर ज्वाइन करता है तो प्रतिलिपि पे बिकॉज इतने सारे रिव्यूज और कमेंट्स ये सब चलते हैं, तो पहला चीज तो ये कि एज अ राइटर, लाइक एवरी राइटर इज ऑल्सो रीडर, तो यू आर गेनिंग वन रीडर. Second is that this writer might be giving you advice on what you can do better. This writer might be giving you advice on कि अच्छा ending ऐसे नहीं करके ऐसी करनी चाहिए थी. तो same side network effects is not as strong, but there's still some same side network effects as well.
And if I have to build a network effect in my, let's say in my startup, how would you do that? How do you
That's what I'm trying to say. कि there are certain kind of companies that have network effects. There are certain kind of companies that haven't. So you can do things to improve network effects slightly. There are things you can do to make like companies that have no network effects to have weak network effects. But by definition, network effects is about a model. It's not something that you can do. It's like अगर marketplace type behavior होगा तो generally it will have network effects, versus अगर single purpose tool type होगा तो it will not have network effects. So it's not something that you create. It's more like something that exists because of business model itself.
And if I'm building a marketplace, let's say, how would you do that?
For a marketplace, cross-site network effects will almost always exist any which case.
Of course, that's the model. Yes.
Like that will almost always exist for the for any marketplace. Maybe not any, but 95% of cases. Same cycle, depending on use case to use case, there are things that you can do. For example, let's say in Amazon's case, a easy answer is like people who bought this also bought this. Now suddenly Amazon having more buyers is also good for other buyers because your recommendation improves.
Right.
Or for example, there is a approach in recommendation called collaborative filtering, which is basically trying to find out people who are like people, how do I put this? Like, let's say both of us like some things, and then whatever I like but you don't like, you have a high likelihood of liking that. So that again improves the experience of everyone. Or you can build features where there is a social angle where people interact with each other. Again, there's a social angle that brings same-side network effects. So there are things that you can do to improve same-side network effects. There are also things that you can do for improving like multiple-side network effects, but it will depend a lot on the use case. So like giving generic answers कि ये कर लो network effects आ जाएगा, that is almost impossibly hard.
अभी आपके पास 1 मिलियन राइटर्स हैं लगभग. इंडिया में कितने ऐसे लोग हैं who officially write to make a living for their life?
If you exclude journalism, maybe 5,000, probably less than that.
Got it. और ऐसे कितने लोग हैं जो शौकिया, मतलब अभी अपने पास 1 मिलियन
Pratilipi is like 90% of the market.
90% of the market. Crazy. एक ही आपने कैटेगरी क्रिएट करी है. जब आप शुरुआत में कर रहे थे तो हाउ वर यू एबल टू जब वो लोग पूछते हैं आपसे, इन्वेस्टर्स पूछते हैं कि कितना बड़ा मार्केट है, व्हाट्स द
So this has been one of the big lessons. There are investor sides at least. There are people who believe that it's a large market. There are people who would not. People who don't believe, it's impossibly hard to change them.
convince them.
It's just not worth the effort. So generally what I've learned is that MBA type people want, or most of the investors, what they want is certainty. They don't care as much about accuracy. It's not that they don't care. It's like if they have to make a trade-off between accuracy and certainty, they would prefer certainty.
What's the difference? Help me understand this.
Certainty is basically like think of it precision, for example, like 85.6% growth. So think on this way. Let's pick two companies. One company grows by 10% in 1 month, 30% in second month, and 0% in third month. Overall, you have grown by like what? A little more than 40%.
Right.
There is second company which grows by 5% month 1, 5% month 2, 5% month 3. Overall, you have grown by 17-18%. Most investors would prefer the second company over the first company, which makes no freaking sense, but that's just how investor mind works. So people prefer predictability and certainty versus like overall net outcome. And which is why like, so the way I think and the way I think people should think is more in the sense that like, is the problem space large enough? Now, if the problem space is large enough, then basically it doesn't really matter if it's $82 billion TAM or $36 billion TAM. It's a large enough TAM, that's enough. But unfortunately, that's not how most people think. The second way is that generally, like good leaders should be thinking in terms of use cases. Like go back to about 5-7 years back when there was a lot of hoopla around what is Uber's market size and Uber's TAM. Ashwath Damodharan wrote a piece, and then Bill Gurley wrote a piece, and a bunch of other people spoke about it. So the question becomes, what is Uber? Like if Uber is a black car company or black taxi company, that's a pretty small market.
Right.
If Uber is a car company, now that's a reasonably large market.
Right.
But the best founders or the best leaders should not even be thinking like this. Uber is neither a black car company, not a car company. Uber is what it's solving is transportation. It's today cars, tomorrow it might be something else. Now, when you think of Uber as a transportation company, for example, now they are transporting goods, like food. Like if you expand that to mean transportation, TAM is suddenly like almost
Increase 4x, 5x.
Exactly. So I think the best founders and by extension, the investors who are backing them should be thinking in terms of what problem are you solving? What is the actual use case you are solving versus thinking of like, this is the market or this is the feature and that feature is this big.
So while you were pitching to investors, you were selling the story कि अगर किसी को भी कोई भी स्टोरी को डेमोक्रेटाइज करना है किसी भी फॉर्म में, किसी भी लैंग्वेज में, किसी भी फॉर्मेट में, प्रतिलिपि will be
That was
the
my
solution.
original thesis, yes. But I think very quickly, like within 6 to 9 months, I understood that that story is not going to sell because most people were just not able to imagine what that looks like. So initial pitch was that basically we're building a more modern version of Disney, where stories will start from one language, one format, one geography, but over a period of time, it will go across everything. But within, I think, 6 to 9 months, we understood that this is not what people are going to kind of be able to imagine.
क्या चैलेंज आ रहा था, क्या क्वेश्चंस आ रहे थे इसमें?
The ambition just seems too big for somebody who's like 23, 24. You haven't done anything in your life. It just sounds like too many assumptions. Like, and which is understandable. Like, why should I believe that you'll be able to do this, 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 and this, and this? Like, there are just too many assumptions.
Right.
So the second pitch was that okay, we are going to be building like a Kindle or a Wattpad or a child literature, and that's what we are building. That's what we are asking you money for. But like, here is the optionality that that's not what we want to do. What we want to do is build all of that. But even if we don't do all of that, you will still make money. It's like, if you are worried about whether I'll be able to build comics and audio and physical books and movies and TV shows or not, don't worry about it. You don't have to worry about it.
But you have to at least convey that in order to, maximize.
No, I am conveying that because tomorrow I don't want you to come and ask me why are you doing this. I want to be in the moral right. I told you this 10 years back that I will be doing this. In future, we'll also be doing this, but you don't have to worry about it right now. Like whether that is successful or not, this itself is a big enough business.
Got it. What are some other learnings that you had from the investor side while, raising so much funds?
I think mostly people care about things that they can see is probably the biggest learning. So there has to be predictability, as I said, because they can see that predictability and they can put it into Excel model and say, okay, next 24 months, company has grown 5% every month, so it will grow 5% for next 24 months. This way we'll get at. But if you grow 10%, 20%, 0%, that's very hard to kind of model. Investors have very short memories, so they will basically double down on and like over-index on whatever has happened in the last 3 to 6 months versus like thinking what happened 30, 40 years back. Versus like what of actual learning comes from things which are timeless. Like a lot of actual learning comes from things which were true 100 years back, which are true today. But like that's not how most investors' minds think.
Give me an example of, things which were true 100 years back and which are true,
A good example would be Pratilipi itself, right? Like, so our thesis behind Pratilipi is that great stories were powerful 1,000 years back. Like people used to read Shakespeare, for example, or Ramayana, Mahabharata, for example. They were powerful 100 years back. They are powerful today. And chances are that they would be powerful 1,000 years later. Now, languages will change. 1,000 years back, it might have been Sanskrit and Latin. Today, it might be Hindi and English. 1,000 years later, it might be something else. Formats might be different. 1,000 years back, it might have been stone tablets. Today, it might be paper or mobile phones. 1,000 years later, it might be something else. But the stories themselves will still remain valuable. Even better example is what Bezos famously said. So Bezos said that it's very hard to predict what is going to change in the future because there's just so many variables. It's easy to predict what is not going to change. And in Amazon's case, he said 3 things are never going to change. One, that people will always want cheaper products. It's never going to be the case that people want more expensive products. People will always want more choices. And people will always want deliveries to be faster. And all these 3 things were true 100 years back. They are true today. They will probably be true 100 years later.
In your business, what is something that is not going to change?
That's what I said. Like great stories were powerful, are powerful, will remain powerful. So our focus is basically on like how do you find the great stories, number one, and they can come from anywhere. So like you have to basically be everywhere in every format, every language, every geography. You have to find a way to find these best stories, and once you have found them, then you basically kind of leverage them into every format. So that was true, is true, will remain true. What will change is like how quickly can you do this.
all the users that you have, majority, there are 12 languages on the platform,
On
right?
literature, 12 languages, yes.
इसमें से how much of it is English, and then Hindi,
English is about 2%, 3%.
बाकी सारी मतलब मलयालम, हिंदी, जो बंगाली, इन सब का क्या ब्रेकडाउन है?
Malayalam, Hindi, and Marathi are the three biggest languages. Depending on which metric you look at, generally Malayalam would be the largest, followed by Hindi, followed by Marathi.
Or what are type of metrics that you consider to look at which language is big? And
the easy one is, for example, DAU. More better metric is stories read or total time spent per language. You could also look at number of writers, number of stories published. You could look at total time spent in a day. There are different ways to look at the same thing.
आपके जो यूजर है उसका डेमोग्राफिक्स क्या है, किस एज में है, ये किस ज्योग्राफी में है, ये क्या, इनका क्या ऑक्यूपेशन है? हेल्प मी, गिव मी सम इनसाइट्स ऑन दैट.
Pratilipi essentially is an entertainment company, right? So which means that our demographics is quite broad. But high level idea in terms of geography, about 3% users come from outside India, mostly NRIs. We haven't actively expanded anywhere yet. About 50% users come from top 7 cities in India. Then the remaining 47% come from tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. In terms of gender, on a DAU basis, about 50% are now men and 50% are women. In terms of stories read, about 60% are women and 40% are men. In terms of age group, 18 to 34 is the biggest chunk. That's about 40-45% of users. Rest is more or less split.
अब ये जो आपने डेमोग्राफिक दिया, ये इस डेमोग्राफिक को what are they consuming? What are they liking? Give me the preferences of these consumers now.
So the top 3 genres, and it also depends quite a bit on language to language and city to city, but on an overall basis, the top 3 genres are number 1, suspense, and actually now number 1 is romance, number 2 is suspense and thriller, number 3 is horror and paranormal.
इन 3 जेंडर में क्या सबसे ज्यादा डोपामिन हिट होता है? ये ऐसा क्यों चलता है? क्यों सबसे ज्यादा रोमांस, सस्पेंस, हॉरर? Why does these work?
Because generally in the broader world, these are the top genres, right? Like what okay, name 5 genres which are not these 3.
It could be education, business.
Education is not, that's what I said. Pratik is an entertainment company.
Right.
The education or business are not going to be part, as in they would be, but that would be a very small part of entertainment.
Makes sense. So जो भी आपकी डेमोग्राफिक है, when you say कि इन डेमोग्राफिक्स को ये 3 चीज अच्छी लगती है.
Just to be clear, these 3 combined would still only be about 40% of TV's readership. So you would have essentially about maybe 400 odd genres. It's just that the top 3 would combine for about 40%.
Give me city-wise preferences
That
also.
will take too much.
Give me some insightful, कि कौन सी cities में क्या
For
चलता है?
example, in Bengal, stories which are about social causes are quite popular. Stories about black magic are quite popular. In Tamil Nadu, stories around science fiction are quite popular. Political thrillers are quite popular. So there would be sub-genres depending on state to state, but like that would be a very long discussion.
Or Rajasthan, or what's the northern belt?
I would Rajasthan, I don't know. UP, Bihar, for example, pulp fiction is very popular, which is like a combination of multiple different genres. There's a little bit of romance, little bit of mystery, little bit of thriller thrown in. Kind of like masala Bollywood movies types.
Have you understood anything about Indian audience? Which is
honest answer, we don't care. The thought process is that we are not a marketing company, we are a tech company, which means that my personalization engine is not for 5 different audiences, it's for 1 million different audiences. My recommendation is absolutely personalized to you, not to 18-year-olds. It's specifically personal to you.
And how do you personalize that recommendation?
So we are looking at 200 different parameters, including your own reading graph, like what you have read in the past, your social graph, the kind of people that you are following, the kind of people that they are following, the readers that you are reading, their social graph. We are looking at collaborative filtering of people who are similar to you. We are looking at like content itself, that the content that you are reading, how similar it is to other content. So it's a combination of variety of different factors that would go into that personalization.
And for someone who is very new to platform, new to your platform, जिसके पास कोई track record है,
recommendation is going to be a very hit and miss. Recommendation is not going to be very good. That's going to be basically around whatever we know right now. For example, which genres do you prefer, or like what gender you have, the geography you are coming from, but that's not going to be very good.
Recently, अभी एक शायद डील, मतलब एक फेमस चीज हुई थी जहाँ पे नेटफ्लिक्स ने फेसबुक के साथ टाई अप करा था कि आप मुझे सारे आपके यूजर्स के मैसेजेस दे दो, और फेसबुक ने बोला था कि आपका जो भी रिकमेंडेशन है वो दे दो. सो डू यू आल्सो?
Doesn't sound right.
That doesn't sound right, of course.
I don't think there's a deal like that exists.
No, of course. But do you try to understand कि जहाँ यूजर्स आ रहे हैं, तो अगर उसका कोई बैकग्राउंड डेटा हमारे पास नहीं है, so what are some things that you do in order
Almost
to
nothing.
Almost nothing.
The thought process for a new user, it's going to be a lot of hit and miss.
Got it. Also, help us understand what are some AI applications apart from, recommendation algorithms and stuff. Are there any AI applications that you have?
A lot, even though we prefer calling it ML versus AI because AI is like a very catch-all word.
Right.
Like I'll go through a few examples. ML specifically first, and then generative AI second. So first is that recommendation has two parts. One part is personalization, like what stories to recommend to what person. The second part is also about content that should not be there on the platform. Think of copyright violation, think of hate speech, incitement to violence, pornography, bunch of other stuff. So we have ML models to essentially look at content and remove content that should not be there on the platform in the first place. So that is a big application. This is on the ML front. The second big application on the ML front essentially is in terms of finding out which stories are going to be successful that we want to leverage into comics and audio and physical books and movies in the first place.
And how do you do that? कि किन stories का सबसे ज़्यादा engagement है, किन stories को
So
लोग
again, you would look at like 100 different parameters. You would look at, for example, completion rate of the story. Like if 100 people started reading a story, did 90 finish it or 50 finish it? You look at repeat rate of the story. Like if people are coming and rereading that story, that's probably good. You look at average rating. You'll mine through reviews. What are people saying about that story? So a bunch of different factors, like how quickly is it gaining traction? And accordingly, you'll say, okay, this story is likely to be very powerful and maybe you should acquire that story. So that is the second big bunch of use cases around machine learning. On generative AI, that's largely around converting stories from one format to a different format. So for example, like converting that story into a comic book. Earlier, it used to be like 100% manual. So it will take about 8 days to create one chapter of 60 panels. Today, it would take about 7.5 hours to create the same chapter with about 60 panels.
And what all tools do you use in order to do this?
We use almost every tool that's available and we keep on seeing like which one works best right now. But on top of generally, like mostly it's Midjourney and Stable Diffusion. On top of that, we have built an internal tool for character consistency because neither Midjourney nor Stable Diffusion has a long memory. So it doesn't remember, for example, that like this character is not supposed to. Exactly. So we have built a tool that retains that memory and then utilizing distinct tools.
Got it. This is interesting. So there is this problem जो अभी बहुत सारे लोग solve करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि जो भी content है वो जैसे मान लीजिए अगर इंग्लिश में है, so how far do you think that every English content can be converted into all different languages? So जो language as a barrier किसी भी platform पे है, that will go away.
We don't know. Like for utilitarian content, not entertainment content. For utilitarian content, I think we are largely already there. So if it's a, let's say, science textbook, we are like maybe 95% already there. It can be converted across multiple languages, like with 99 human level accuracy. For entertainment content, on the other hand, we are not anywhere near.
ऐसा क्यों मतलब what's the difference between utilitarian content and entertainment content?
Utilitarian content is like reasonably yes and no. Exactly. Like it means like go there means go there. But like in entertainment, depending on the accent and the flow of how you are saying something, it can make a lot of difference to what you are saying.
And this got it, because it's more like you have to read behind the lines and there are more human aspect. Do you think AI will solve this problem?
It will. It's just a question of will it take 6 years or 6 months? We don't know.
But do you think within a decade we will be very...
I would put like 99% odds on that. I think not even a decade. I think I would put 99% odds that AI would be human good in the next 3-4 years.
Human good in terms of converting that. What are some other predictions that you have around AI?
It's very hard to make predictions. As I said, like it's much better to predict on things which are not going to change. It's much harder to predict on what is going to change.
AI आने की वजह से कौन सी ऐसी चीजें हैं जो change नहीं होंगी? Even if AI, let's say rules, it permeates into the lives, what are certain things that won't change in
I
this
think
technology?
things that require intuition, those are harder to change. Like for example, which story is going to work not based on data. Like think of Harry Potter, for example. Almost every publisher said that it's not going to work out.
It was 12th or 13th, yeah.
So like, that was actually not even the publisher's intuition, her child's intuition, that this is a story that I engage with. Like because people assume that high fantasy is dead, so there wasn't enough data on high fantasy for the last 10 years any which case. Somebody intuitively said that even though there is no data, I feel like this story will work. So that intuition-based jobs are not going to go away. Like creating original hypotheses, that's not going to change. If 100 people took a call on a Harry Potter, 99 of those editors out of the job, because there is one Harry Potter and then there are 99 failures. So like an AI model that's 1% right will basically just not even see the market. But humans will have that. So which is why like anything that requires intuition, anything that actually has a high failure rate, those kind of things cannot be automated.
help you also understand about the monetization. So सबसे ज्यादा बड़ी जो प्रॉब्लम होती है वो लोग मतलब हर बार यही कहते हैं कि हम मोनेटाइज नहीं कर पाते. बट देयर आर कंपनीज लाइक डिज्नी जिनके 50 मिलियन से ज्यादा पेइंग यूजर्स हैं. हाउ हैव you know evolved the monetization stages on the platform?
I think people want to have a simple generic answer. The thing is, like, life doesn't have simple generic answer. It depends on what you are doing. If I think companies should always, or people should always have, like, either be unit economics positive or have a very strong line of sight into being unit economics positive. In 99% of cases, again, there are exceptions, but by and large. Beyond that, though, it differs. Like, for example, think of WhatsApp. It's a messaging service. It doesn't, like, if 10 people use it or 11 people use it, the incremental cost is very close to zero. In those cases, it doesn't matter how you monetize. Monetization is a feature. Like, you can launch that feature 10 years later, 20 years later, nobody should care, logically at least. Versus there are companies like, for example, let's say I'm distillery. Like, every new bottle that I create, there's a cost that goes into it. So even in the worst case scenario, I should be able to cover that cost that is there in the next bottle of water. But like, so that is my thought process. Beyond that, I think it depends on use case to use case. There is no one right answer.
Are you unit wise positive?
We are company wide positive. Like, April would be the first month we would be cash flow positive.
Wow. How are you able to achieve that? वो जो वो shift हुआ focus में वो कैसे आपने लेके आए और how are you able to actually execute that?
It's not that hard. My variable cost is zero. We have strong network effects. Monetization is the easiest part of the puzzle for a UGC company. Like, it's among all the things that we do or we have done, monetization is the easiest part. Because people spend 90 minutes per user per day, because retention is so freaking good, because you have strong network effects, because you have lack of competition. Monetization is like, you're spending 2 hours on a platform every day. Why wouldn't you pay?
You mentioned lack of competition. Who do you consider your competition to be?
Realistically, essentially, you have to think of anybody who plays within entertainment is a competition. So if you're not using a Pratilipi app, whatever else you are doing, you're playing cricket, you're watching Netflix, you're watching YouTube, all of that is essentially competition.
So for example, Cook says कि water is their competition. कि अगर किसी को भी प्यास लगी है and if they're going for water and not taking a cola, it's a competition.
Yeah, so you have to think about the use case. The use case is entertainment. Anything that entertains you is essentially competition.
If there is something which is entertaining someone, what makes something entertaining? This is more of like
I don't think there's a right answer because it depends on people to people. So there are things that I would consider abhorrent that some people find entertaining. There are people who are serial killers because they like killing people. So there's no right answer. Like, whatever entertains you is for you entertainment. When I said Pratilipi is into entertainment, I meant like IP-based, story-based entertainment essentially is what we will focus on. So for example, let's say memes entertain a lot of people, short videos entertain a lot of people. Neither of these are an area of interest to me. Will they still compete for users' attention? They will. But that's the part of competition that we don't care about.
Coming to the podcast, you acquired IVM podcast, right? There are so many podcasts available out there in the market. So there is currently the transition is बहुत सारे जितने भी YouTubers हैं, they are trying to sell their launch their own businesses, and जितने भी business holders हैं, they are trying to come into podcasting. जब market में इतने सारे podcasts हो जाते हैं, so how do you think someone who is building a podcast can differentiate and can increase?
Podcasting is essentially like a media company, right? It might be just one person media company. It's still a media company. So media is never, or very rarely, unless like there's unfair means of play, it's very rarely a like winner takes it all market. There will always be 50 different TV channels, 100 different publishers, and so on and so forth, as long as the government is doing their job right. Which means that first step is to understand that like you don't have to lose for a different podcaster to win. You don't have to win for a different podcaster to lose. It can be a win-win solution.
It's not a zero-sum.
It's not a zero-sum game. Unlike, let's say, tech, where a lot of times for a Uber to win, a Ola has to lose. In network effects-based companies, that's usually the case, that for one guy to win, the other guy has to lose. That's not true for media companies. That's not true for podcasters. That's number one. Number two is like what we were talking about writing earlier. Like, to be great at anything, the most important thing essentially is just iteration. Like, you have to keep yourself out there. You have to listen to feedback. You have to get better every day. Like, essentially, consistency and listening to feedback is what it takes to become great at anything. And podcasting is no different. That's true for cricket. That's true for driving. That's true for writing. That's true for acting and everything else that you can think of. So like iterations, not just frequency, but like frequent or iterations with a high frequency. So you keep on learning, you keep on revising. That's probably second. And third is what we were talking about in terms of Kohli, for example, the ability to reinvent yourself. You have to look at how the technology as well as the broader world is changing and basically ride those waves. So, for example, let's say now that generative AI is becoming better, you should be utilizing that to make yourself like a better podcaster, or like creating content faster, or like engaging with your users better. So you cannot say that, like this is what 90% people are doing and this is what seems to work for them, so this is what I'm going to do. You have to look at how the world has changed and what can I do to utilize that. And then you need a little bit of luck. So that would at least be what I would say.
Are there any tools that can be leveraged by individual creators, like let's say for example podcasters, that you think?
Bunch of different examples. Like easy examples, for example, let's say editing.
Of course,
it could become so much easier now. Subcaptioning or like subtitling.
Super easy, huh?
Yeah. Transcript providing. Like there are people like me, for example, who just find reading so much better than watching or listening. Why not expand your use case to reach out to them as well? Like it 99% of transcripting can be done by a AI, and then 1% you just need to edit that. For example, like just automatically creating shorter clips of that podcast and putting them on YouTube Shorts and Facebook and Instagram and whatnot. And these are just some of the examples. There are so many others.
जैसे फॉर एग्जाम्पल उम्मीदयार नेटवर्क, मैंने बहुत सारे फाउंडर्स से इतनी सारी चीजें सुनी है. I've heard good things about that thing, and we recently know that it left India. Please help me understand what was the reason for them to leave India. What happens to a company when one of the investors, because I believe Umedyar was one of the largest shareholders of your company. What happens to the portfolio company when
first one is not my place to answer. Like it's up to Umedyar and their team to talk about. Second is easier to answer. In Umedyar's portfolio case, it's very, very easy. Nothing happens. So basically, they will not be making new investments and they'll be very rarely be making follow-on investments into existing companies. But outside of that, like the team has been very clear that there's no extra pressure. You can provide exit whenever it works for you. We will continue to engage, we'll continue to help exactly the way we have. So nothing really changes. What happens in other cases depends on a specificity of case. In mature markets like US, generally, even if the fund dies, companies don't have to suffer too much. Worst case scenario, what they will do is they will sell your shares to a different company.
And they will find some seller for that stake.
Sometimes they may ask founders for help, that can you help us find a buyer? But like that's more like case to case basis, depending on what the dynamic is between the investor and the company. But there's no one size fits all answer. It will depend on what the fund is doing. It will depend on what the company is doing. But in Umedyar's case, like not just for Pratilipi, for across the board, it doesn't really change much for anyone.
Tell me a time when you were at a very low point in your life and what was the best advice that you received?
One example might be that I was quitting Vodafone because I was just pissed off at like how slow and bureaucratic the process was. And the CMO of Vodafone at the time basically said that, we have whatever 20, 30,000 employees. Even if you leave, like what difference does it make to Vodafone? Versus you stay and prove me wrong that you're actually good at sales. That would, if nothing else, Vodafone is still not here, but you will feel better that you have proved everybody wrong.
Who are certain people that you learn from at this stage?
A lot of people for a lot of different things. Musk could be a good example. Vivekanand is a good example. Steve Jobs is a good example. Bezos, I think, is a very good example. Buffet is a good example.
People in Bangalore. People in India.
People in India. Himesh is a good example from Unacademy. Nishit from Locus is a good example. Aditya from Umedyar is a good example. All of these are Bangalore people. As in Nishit now lives in London, but Himesh in Academy is Bangalore. Aditya kind of keeps on shifting, but he should be in Bangalore in a few months.
Got it. What are certain things that gives you real happiness in your life? Long-term pleasure.
I think basically the only thing that I get pleasure from, not counting very short-term things like cricket, for example, is a good example, would basically be like seeing someone that you thought has high potential doing justice to that potential. It could be a friend, it could be a colleague, but in both cases, like seeing someone live up to their potential is probably the most satisfying thing.
Got it. If you had to make entrepreneurs, अगर कोई एक आदमी है जिसके बस कीड़ा लगा हुआ है कि यार कुछ मेरे को अपना बनाना है, what would you say to him or her कि do this, read that, or think like this?
I think more than anything else, it's like become resourceful, like get good at getting shit done. A lot of times you might have to change certain things because of real world constraints, but essentially become resourceful, relentlessly resourceful. That was probably the number one advice.
What are some books that kind of, I know 130 books.
Forget about books. Go on Twitter, find out 20, 30, 40 people that seem smart to you. Ideally, people like where you agree with them on 70% things or 30% things. You disagree with them on, again, 50, 70% things. Find 30, 40 people like that, follow them, like read whatever they are sharing.
Wow.
Have a broader base.
Wow. And why do you say Twitter?
I think it has a very high density of smart people, high density of people who are opinionated. And that's why I clarified that ideally it should be people that you agree with on certain things and you disagree with on certain things so that you have a broader horizon. You want to think for yourself. You don't want to become the second Jeff Bezos. You want to become like the best version of you. For that, you need to have like a broader base to learn from, including things that you don't agree with.
What are some really great movies that you have recently watched that you would recommend us?
I don't watch that many movies, and recently, so it's very, very hard.
Do you travel?
Not much.
What's your favorite food place?
Place, nothing. Favorite food, dal chawal chokha.
Okay. Where's the अगर किसी को दाल
I have no clue. I'm not a foodie. I eat just because I need food to survive. I don't care about food.
What is on your bucket list?
Less about, okay, actually then two things. One is that I want to essentially start may not be like some kind of early stage investment thing, maybe accelerator, maybe a fund, who knows, with the ability to double down significantly on things which are not yet clear to people. So a lot of times what happens is people look at lagging indicators, like for example, profitability. Like I knew a year back that profitability is now done. Like I don't have to do shit about it. It's just going to take 12 months to get there. Or for example, even revenue. A lot of times these are things which are lagging indicators. It will happen 6 months later. But operators or people who are honest with themselves, they can see that 6 months, 12 months ahead in advance. So I want to be able to invest into things which are obvious. It's just that they are not yet obvious to the rest of the world. So that's probably something that I want to do.
Give me one example that of certain thing that you.
For example, a company that has great engagement and great frequency, monetization is like a given. It doesn't matter how they monetize, they will be able to become profitable. It doesn't.
Please, sorry to.
No, I was saying like as long as they have that, monetization is a byproduct. I would not wait for them to monetize. Like I would invest today.
What's the second thing on your bucket list that you were telling?
These are two related things. The second thing was basically like, having enough capital to invest into people where it's not obvious to the rest of the world that they're already great.
What's the biggest challenge in your life that you're facing right now? That can be in life or that can be in business?
No specific challenge. I think the only challenge is like a lot of times when you're going through difficult times, people start panicking. So challenge is like our balance sheet is not very strong, even though our P&L is very strong. So as I said, like this is our first month that will become cash flow positive. But because of balance sheet not being strong, like I'm always worried about people, including team members, including investors, suddenly panicking. So that just, it doesn't do anything. It just wastes time, and there's a risk of that panic cascading. So managing that people don't panic, I think that's the only worry.
When you say that your balance sheet is not strong, what do you mean by that?
That means how much money you have in the bank. Got it. So we have had less than 6 months of runway for the last 18 months.
What are you doing about it?
We are cash flow positive. It doesn't matter. Now we have infinite runway.
Super. This has been great. Thanks a lot.